Today we're going to talk about where immigrants went once they came to this country. We're going to get to take a look at an interactive map brought to us by the New York Times that gets to show us the population of immigrants by each county in the United States. It's pretty cool to actually watch, and you'll get a chance to play around with it tomorrow or next time we have class. Many people already had family here in the United States. In fact, that's what brought a lot of people here to America. But if you were an immigrant who didn't know anyone here already, how would you know where to go? How would you know where to get a job? How would you know anything about what to do? What would typically happen is people would come and they'd find other people who speak the same language as them. Let's take an Italian immigrant, for instance. They come here, they're going to most likely only be able to talk to people who speak Italian. That'll keep them in certain circles. When those people get off a ship, they're going to go up to the people who speak Italian and say, can you help me? Where do I go? Or they might say, can you give me a ride to this place? Or they might say, hey, do you know anywhere that has jobs? You can really only interact with the people who speak the same language as you, which gives people some limited options. These connections that they made, though, would typically lead them to locations where there are already a large number of people speaking that same language. That Italian immigrant might end up going to a location that's already filled with lots of Italian people. Therefore, his life's not going to change too significantly from back home, wherever in Italy that person came from. People will speak Italian. Chances are most people would be the same religion, in this case probably Roman Catholic. People would have the same traditions. Life wouldn't change too significantly. Here he would have shelter, he would have food, he would have maybe the opportunity of getting a job or the opportunity of getting in touch with someone who can give him a job. If this person stepped off the boat, couldn't find anyone who didn't speak the same language as him, he wouldn't have nearly as good of a chance as finding anything, finding a way of surviving. These communities would generally crop up in bigger cities because that's where the jobs were. And if they crop up in these bigger cities, you would see large populations of Italians, for instance, in one location. And these locations later became known as Little Italy or Chinatown or Little Ukraine, whatever they might be. You'll find these cities all over the country still to this day, or even the whole world. But they started back during this time period because when immigrants got off the boat, they needed a place to go. They would make sure that they went with people that they could speak to, people that were similar to them, and someone that had a culture that was not too far off from what they were used to. Think about it, too. If you end up in one of these locations, you might not need to learn a new language. Everyone around you speaks Italian. Why do I need to learn English? Most life would surround around one location, though. In these cities that would pop up, based around one culture, they would usually be based around the religious life. So in a Catholic community, the town would revolve around the church. In a Jewish community, the whole culture would revolve around the synagogue. Religion became the thing that unified them in this country. Whether they came from Naples or Milan or Rome, they were all Catholic. So they would all come together at their church where they all spoke Italian. So now, as opposed to having Romans or people from Florence, you had American Italians. So here we are on the New York Times Interactive Immigration Explorer. This is a pretty cool website you get to use. There's a couple things you need to understand before we get into it. A couple of parts of the diagram. The first part, up here, you see a time frame. You can scroll this all the way from 1880 through our current time period, 1920, all the way up until 2000 when this the last census data was released for this purpose. The next thing to look at is the big map. This shows you the country broken down by county. So every little blip you see is a county. We can even point to us right here in Sullivan County. So whichever of these two, which I'll show you next, you're looking at it by county, not city or town, but county. What we're looking at right now is the percentage of the population that is immigrant born. So if we look at Sullivan County, you can see the total population is 18,161. The foreign-born population is 1,303. Now, why is it that color green as opposed to what most of the rest of the map is purple? If you look down here at the next section, you'll see that information. Anything that is green comes from immigrants. Any square that is green, the immigrants in that county come predominantly from Canada. Purple, Western Europe. Yellow, this is more of an orange, Asia and the Middle East. Reddish, Latin America. Blue, Eastern European and Russian. Pink is African. Now, that doesn't mean that in Sullivan County there were no other immigrants from anywhere else besides Canada. It just means that the majority of immigrants were Canadian. The other thing you can look at is number of residents. This is again by county, but it shows you the population in a different graphic. You can see each by its various bubbles. If I zoom in to New York, you can see the county of Manhattan had a foreign-born population of 478,670 in 1880 in a population of, let's just say, 1.2 million. That shows you that almost half of the population of Manhattan was foreign-born at that time. Zoom back out. All right. So you follow along. I'm going to go back to percent of population. You follow along based on these colors. Now, as you notice, most of the map right now seems to be some shade of purple. The darker it is, that means the higher the percentage of the population comes from that region. Most of the country is purple of some shade. There's a little bit of blue, and the north has a lot of Canadian. Like us here in New Hampshire, we have a lot of Canadian. But why is it mostly Western Europe? Well, like we learned before 1880, most immigrants came from England, Ireland, Germany. And that reflects here, and that shows you that when they came to this country, anytime someone moved out west, they said, hey, come on out, this is a great place. More immigrants would then go to those locations, which is why certain counties, as you can see all over the country, are filled up predominantly with one specific type. Now, let's see how this goes. After 1880, things changed. They were no longer Western European, but they were coming from Northern Europe and Eastern Europe. I'm sorry, Southern Europe and Eastern Europe. So let's just fast forward this from 1880 to 1890. The map starts to fill out a little bit more, but still predominantly purple. Still predominantly purple in 1900. 1910, we're still seeing purple, but things are starting to change a little bit. If you look in the Southwest, you'll see that people are coming heavily from Latin America. Except for the next 10 years, 1920 to 1930, they stopped coming from Latin America. That's because of the Great Depression. The Mexicans no longer felt the need to come across to the United States if it was no better here than it was there. But I'm also seeing a lot more of the blue spreading out into the Midwest. Okay, a lot more blue spattered throughout the country. All right, now we're in the 1960s. This is just fun to watch, actually, at this point. But let's zoom back to 1880. I'm going to go to number of residents now, and you're going to get to watch this map. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more here so we can see the Northeast, for instance. Now, take a look at a couple of locations. Cook County, Illinois is where Chicago is. Now, if you'll notice in 1880, that's already blue, which means Russia and Eastern Europe. Take a look at Manhattan. It's this big bubble right here. That's Western Europe, so we're talking primarily Irish. You can see the same thing for Suffolk County, where Boston is. I guess I'll have to scroll out a little bit, but I'm going to show you what happens as this changes. Okay, look at this big bubble. Manhattan now has switched to that blue. That's Russia and Eastern Europe. Chicago, Cook County, is still a giant ball of Eastern Europe. Now watch in 1900, it gets bigger and bigger, and then a little smaller. But take a look at the rest of the map. All over the map, you see these large bubbles all over the place of immigrants moving into those locations. And that's that same thing that happened earlier on. An immigrant moves out to an area and says, hey, this is great, come on out. And then any immigrant who comes in, they get off the boat, they're looking for a place to stay. They say, hey, do you know where to go? He says, sure, I got a cousin out in Cook County, out in Chicago, he'll give us a place to go. If you go to Chicago today, a lot of the names out there are Russian or Polish because Eastern Europeans flocked to that part of the country. If you look up at this top section here, this will help you with your projects. All countries, you can click on this and find out during that whole time period, 1880 to 2000, where the most immigrants from that country went to. I'm going to click on Italy, for instance. In 1880, not that many immigrants, only a couple in the tri-state area. 1890, 1900, you see it expanding. Now Italians are everywhere, and so are pizzerias. Thank the Lord. You can do the same for any of the countries up here. It doesn't give you options for everyone, so if your research project doesn't bear one of these countries, then you just have to figure it out from there. But this map is fun to look at. I just want to show you one other thing that's just more interesting than anything else. A lot of you don't like taking Spanish. Well, I'm going to show you, based on a map of immigrants, why you should learn Spanish. We're in 1880, 1900. Look, hardly any Latin Americans coming through. The Southwest, you see quite a few. But let's take a look what happens after this period, 1960 to 1970. I want you to take a look at the border between Mexico and the United States. Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California. Watch. Every one of those bubbles is a large portion of people speaking Spanish. 3.5 million in a population of close to 9.5 million speaking Spanish in Los Angeles. Same thing in Miami. Same thing in Harris County, Texas. Same thing in Dallas. Same thing in Chicago. Same thing in all counties of New York. Why should you learn Spanish? Because the rest of the country is speaking Spanish. I know I keep promising they're going to be shorter, but deal with it. I'm the teacher. You have to do what I say. I will make this quick. I know a lot of you are just kind of sitting there watching the movie, and that's fine, but I do encourage you to take notes. So if you think you can just watch this, move on, you're probably not going to do as well as your buddies who are taking notes. So what you should be doing is watching these videos, taking notes just like you would be in class. Remember, you don't have to do this in class next time. So this is your chance. It's both homework and taking notes. You just have to spend about 10 minutes doing that. So I think you can handle it on your own. I've spoken too much. Peace.